Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of Not Money, My Own Business. I am your host, Russell Farbiars, your estate planning and elder law attorney. And I am joined here today by Mary Brunski
Yep.
of Demeter Financial Services. I don't know if I said that correctly, but welcome, Mary.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate you having me on your show.
Wonderful. So, Mary, tell me if you could tell our listeners a little bit about you and about your business and what your focus is.
Sure. And I don't know actually if it's all that correct or not, but I call it Demeter,
Thank
um,
you.
the Greek goddess of the harvest. And I
Oh,
chose that because my degree is actually in agricultural communications and economics. And it just seemed to make sense that um, selecting the goddess of the harvest, you reap, you sow your money, and then hopefully you reap the rewards down at the end of the run. So that's what I went for. And I started it back in 2019. I've been in financial services since 2010. But decided to go out on my own. This way I could do my services as I wish to, and I didn't have to worry about, certain products or attitudes of, because I've worked for the companies that they push the annuities, they push the life insurance. And I do believe in those things. They're tools that you can use as part of an overall plan. But this way I can do what I think is going to be best for the client in the long run.
well, that makes a lot of sense. That it sounds like you operate more like a fiduciary, so that and and I've had other fiduciaries on our show, and I find that to be very important to point out. So, well, can you explain a little bit when I'm saying you're a fiduciary, what does that mean in your industry?
Well, and personally, I think anyone who deals with your finances should be a fiduciary. But one
Agreed.
of the things that it that requires us to put the client's best interests ahead of our own. And what that means is that when I do recommend a product or a certain investments, that I'm doing it because I do believe that it is in your best interest, that it's not because I'm going to earn the most commission on that or I'm going to earn the most in the long run on those things. Um, and like I said, anyone who has to deal with your money, I personally believe should be a fiduciary.
Absolutely. I mean, we've all seen, movies like and the Wolf of Wall Street sort of comes to mind. I understand. I understand. Uh, where they're, sort of pushing this one stock, not necessarily because it's in the client's best interest, but because it's in the firm's best interest. And
Mhm.
so I'm sure it's comforting for your clients to know that when you're making that recommendation, it's not because it's going to benefit you, it's going to benefit them.
Right.
So, so how did you originally get started in finance?
Originally got started in it. My husband and I moved back to Pennsylvania back in early 2000. And we worked with a financial planner here for our own um, monies. And as I would talk with the woman, she said, you really seem to understand this. You should consider going into it. And, but my kids were little and I wasn't ready to really make a career change at that point. So I did some substitute teaching for a little bit of time and then kind of went, this is great, but 5:30 a.m. phone calls are not fun.
No.
And I kind of thought, well, if she really thinks I've got the understanding. So I started looking into it and realized, this is fun. Um, One of the things when my husband and I first got married, our first year together, initially we were going to owe money to the IRS. And so I had time off at that point and I went into the library and started researching the IRS regs. And by the time I got done, we got $700 back.
Good for you.
And that's when I started going, hey, if you pay attention or if you learn some of the ins and outs, you can make your money work for you instead of just, hoping that things are going to work out for you. So, and then in particular, when I started this business, it was okay, I really want people to understand what their money is doing for them and what it's not doing for them. I've worked with people on some of their loans. We had one fellow that I worked with that by the time we got done restructuring some of the loans that he had personal loans, signature loans, a business loan, and a student loan for his daughter. And by the time we got done restructuring that, we saved him $18,000 a year.
Wow.
So, it's understanding what your money's doing for you now and what it's not doing for you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what, so I really work with people, and I'm very nosy in that aspect of I'm going to find out everything I can. So if you're really not comfortable sharing everything with me, that's probably, we're not going to be a good fit. But if you'll share everything with me, I can guide you to making your money work harder.
Well, that makes sense. And I know you and I had talked, before we were recording about mindful money management. So what exactly is that to you?
Well, what that is one of the things that I did here recently is I took on the behavioral finance advisor designation. And that is where you sit and you really figure out, why are you spending the money the way you're spending it? And what happens usually is when people are not spending according to their values is when they start having kind of a discomfort with their money. And they also need to understand, what attitudes did they bring from their parents? Most people don't think about that. But I always find it interesting when someone tells me I can't afford that. And it's kind of like, okay, is it you can't afford it, or you're choosing to not afford it? Because there is a difference between those two things. And often when they really start thinking about it, they go, well, I'm making a choice to do something else with my money. And so we sit down first, and one of the things that I try to do with the clients is figure out, what are your values? And we figure out the top 5. For example, mine is family, service, education, health, and meaningful work. So those are the things that I consider when I go to look at, am I going to spend the money on something or not? How does this impact my family? How does it impact my service to the community? How does it impact, and does it help in education or meaningful work? So you start looking at, how is that doing this? So that one of the things that this does, then it helps interrupt any bias that you might have. And one of the things that most people don't really think about is that they do tend to have these biases. Oh, I invested in XYZ and I made, it's up $10,000. Okay. And they attribute that to, they were smart, they bought in at the right time. Then the market turns down and all of a sudden they're down, $11,000. Well, that's the market. So there's the self-attribution bias where you have to think about, okay, did you do well because you actually picked the right thing, or was your timing just really good? So when good things happen, we tend to believe, hey, I did that, I'm great. When bad things happen, oh, well, who could have foreseen that Russia was going to attack Ukraine? And it's going to cause this to happen. So those kind of things. And just looking at what is causing you to want to make this decision to spend this money now. or invest this money here? What's driving that? And take a pause and think that through instead of, because very few times do you have to decide that you're going to invest or that you're going to buy something that moment.
It's very interesting it's a different way to approach spending and investing, but it's very interesting because in my practice, I tell clients that they want to be intentional and create a plan. And it sounds like what you're doing here is really trying to train your clients to do the same thing, to be very intentional. And so do you find that this works really well with clients, or is it hard for them to adopt this philosophy?
Um, the ones that I work with are falling into line. There are a few that will fight me. And I did just recently have some clients that they wanted to make a change that I disagreed with. We've had the discussion a number of times, and it finally came down to when they said, well, we're just not sure. We're thinking we want to do this. And I said, that's fine. It's your money. So I will help you do this, but it will be the last thing I do for you. At that point, after that point, I will no longer be your advisor. And they were like, oh, wait a minute. If you feel that strongly about it, let's take another look at it.
Mhm.
So we talked through it again.
And then that's a good way to sort of keep people honest on this sort of a system is to if you feel that strongly that and you're willing to do that, that really says to people this is important.
Yeah.
And do you find that this helps people manage their money in a way that is where they're more comfortable?
That's what I find is if you can really get them to follow into this, is they tend to have a much better comfort level than with their money. They can, now they're not worrying so much. They're not saying, I can't afford that anymore. They're saying, I'm choosing to do this versus, whatever. And they're not so easily manipulated. One of the things that I always try to tell my kids, my clients, when someone's talking to you about something, I always love the window analogy. The guy comes in to tell you need to replace your windows. And it never fails. They'll come in, oh, it's going to be, whatever it is, $18,000. But if you sign up tonight, we'll give it to you for this amount of money. And because we experienced this, we had somebody come in and tell us that. And I looked at him and I said, I don't decide to spend that kind of money on a moment. So either you can hold that for me for another couple of days, or I can tell you right now, we're not doing it.
Yeah, I never appreciate those high pressure sales tactics, and I am, and any sales coach would probably tell me I'm doing the wrong thing, but I tend to tell clients if we're talking about something significant, go home, think about it, call me tomorrow, because it doesn't do anyone any service, if if someone agrees to a payment that they either can't afford or don't want to afford, and then if they feel trapped, then all they do is resent you anyway.
Exactly.
For that. So I think that makes a lot of sense. How do your clients use this framework in terms of everyday spending, or is this really just an investment strategy?
Actually, I ask them to use it for everything. One of the things that what I tell them to do is I always look at, whatever you want to spend, and if you want to buy a coffee every day, buy a coffee every day. And, that's not going to keep you from becoming financially sound. Unless it is your last dollars. But it's
Then make the
those
coffee at
things.
home.
Yeah. It's those things like, how many streaming services do you need? And if you didn't spend $5 a month on Netflix, where else would you spend that $5? And by the way, that $5 equals to $60 a year. That's, again, it's not going to break the bank. But when you start looking at some other things, I'm trying to think of some that, well, I mean, my husband and I just cut our cable completely, or the satellite dish.
Mhm.
And now all we do is do streaming services. Because one of the things I figured out is we were spending over $2,000 a year on satellite. And I kind of went, $2,000 a year goes a long way towards paying down the mortgage or paying off, other bills. So, and, in spite of having 200 channels, we were watching the same 3 or 4 channels anyway. So why not just get rid of that bill, stream what we want? Now we sit down and we watch whatever we want when we want to watch it.
Yeah, I can't remember the last time I turned on, the TV and started scrolling channels. You know,
Yeah.
it's just not the way people watch television anymore. So
Mm-mm.
that model is definitely on its way out, I think, at least. But
And the
it,
other thing that I asked them to do is even just, again, consider what could be. I'm trying to think. Are you worried about losing money? Are you looking at some of the biases that can come into play? There is, people will get a narrative in their head of why they need to have something, and they will, go for that, and they'll ignore anything that says maybe you shouldn't be spending this money here right now. And often I'll say, just again, take that pause. It's not that I'm going to say you can't do this or you shouldn't do this, but maybe now is not the right time. There are things that we get into, like when you go to buy a car. Let's say you've seen this truck that you like, and at this dealership, they're selling it for $48,000. And when you walk in, they say, well, we like you. We're going to give you $1,000 off, which that's about all they're willing to do these days, if you can even get them to do that. Which, again, you're sitting there and you're going, okay, well, I was researching these, and they said the price range on them was anywhere from, 45,000 up to 50,000, depending on the condition and all this other stuff. If you're buying new, be a different matter. But you go, okay, well, 48 seems reasonable for this. Where if you kind of went and you did a little bit of research and looked around, the dealer down the street might be selling that same truck for 45. So instead of going, okay, this is within the range of what is expected for this truck, you need to sit back and kind of go, well, is this really the best deal I can get for it?
yeah, I mean, and again, it comes back to being intentional and planning and not shooting from the hip, really.
Right. And not being in a hurry.
Right. So now, how does your planning process start? Like, how do you help your clients identify these values that are going to be their guideposts?
Well, I actually have a deck of cards that I use with this. And it's, actually this program, it's the values card deck. And we sit down with it, and you actually put them first into two piles. Ones that, you know, you might consider them, but they're not the most important thing to you. And then these ones over in this pile. Those are the ones that, yeah, you can really, you can hold on to that. And, you know, and it would be things like family and actually, let me pull out some of these. Spirituality might be one of them, flexibility, excellence, those kind of things. So you sort these out, and generally people will end up with, you know, not necessarily two even piles, but they'll end up with one that has a little bit more than the other. And depending on which one that is, I still sit there and go, okay, out of the ones that you really like, or you feel like those are somewhat important to you, narrow that down to 15. So now they have to go through and go, oh, okay, well, yeah, spirituality is important to me, but security is really important too. And I'm going to have to say, you know, out of the two of those, I'm going to pick security type thing. And then once you get it down to 15, we look at it and we go, okay, now get it down to 5. And it is interesting to watch people go through this process, because of course they're sitting there going, you know, but what they finally settle on, that's the things then that we can sit there and go, okay, when you go to make a large purchase, or, you know, do you spend the money on a new truck, or do you put it aside for your kids' education? Out of those two things, which one falls into your values? And if family was one of your top 5 and transportation wasn't in the top 5, then okay, let's look at this again and go back to the process. And, you know, then once you've got the education covered, yeah, go buy the truck. But
it's such a neat way to look at these decisions and really help clients make the decisions that really are best for them.
mhm.
It's I I applaud you for using this method, because I think it's really interesting.
Oh,
Uh,
thank you.
so I would like to have our listeners learn a little bit more about you. So how do you like to spend your time when you aren't working?
Um, I like reading. I read a lot. I
Fiction
do
or nonfiction?
mostly fiction.
Okay.
But I do have, of course, you know, there's certain books. There's a great book recently that a group of us have been working through called Talk Shifts, and
Okay.
it's about communicating, and it's really geared towards business communications, but it'll work in any aspect of your life. So things like that. Then family, of course, is big. It's in my top 5. So we'll spend times, we'll look for things to do. Not last weekend, 2 weekends ago, went and spent some time at local state park Fall Fest.
Oh, nice.
And, you know, just spend a couple hours walking around doing stuff like that. Any hikes we can take out in nature is great. I've been trying to take up running. Struggling with that one a little
Uh,
bit.
that one, I understand. I don't mind walking, but running to me just
Yeah.
I've never gotten into it.
And then I'm also very involved in various organizations. I'm on the board of the local library. Um, I'm a member of the American Association of University Women, and I'm also very involved in our local Rotary Club.
Okay.
And one of the things is their motto, of course, is service above self. And I said, I finally think I found my tribe, because it's amazing what our little club has been able to do in our community, and even for a water project in Kenya.
Hmm. Yeah, I know what you mean. I'm a longtime Rotarian, former club president.
Mhm.
So it is amazing what, a couple of people in a small town can do, when you sort of put all your efforts together.
Exactly. It is amazing. I love Rotary. So
Yeah, yeah. Well, wonderful. And so you said you like to hike, you like to be out in nature. What are your favorite places to get away to?
we have done several vacations down to Shenandoah National Park.
Okay.
Um, beautiful, beautiful area. Love that. And then locally, we have the Appalachian Trail is not far from us. So we've done little sections of that, a couple of really great state parks near us. So we will go wander that, and rails to trails. Those are great because they're level and easy to do.
Wonderful. How do you contribute back to the community? Obviously, Rotary is a way. Maybe that's the primary way.
It is. With the Rotary, I've been involved with our club does a Christmas in July for a local housing project that houses low income elders and disabled folks.
Okay.
And so we will do a program for them every July and provide them with a goodie bag filled with personal care items that they might need.
Very
Uh,
nice.
yeah, I mean, I'm involved in on a district level as well.
Okay.
So trying to help the clubs expand their reach and their impact in the area.
What's your role on the district level?
I'm an assistant governor. So
Are you,
there are 6 clubs that I kind of check in with them and see how things are going and see what the district can do to help them be more effective.
are you in line to be district governor eventually?
I'm going to throw my hat in the ring, so we'll see.
Good for you. I have never gone in that direction, but I have seen that it can be a ton of work, but there's a lot of benefit from it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the woman who's currently in it has been saying that when she does her club visits, it's usually about a 4-hour time block. I was like, ooh,
Oh,
and there's
wow.
42 clubs in our district, so that's a lot of time.
Yeah, yeah. Well, what is something that you think that more people should be aware of about your industry or what you do?
Um, I'd say what I'd love to see is people be more aware of how the advisors are paid. Um, too often, I think they really don't understand how the advisors are paid. And um, that also will kind of tell you why they might be recommending what they're recommending.
Hmm.
And also, if an advisor tells you something and you're kind of going, that doesn't sound like what I've heard before, go ahead and investigate it, because I've had um, I've heard stuff and I've been told things that I'm sitting there going, I don't think that's right. And when I investigated, it's not. Um, they heard it somewhere. It's not that they're trying to be deceitful or what have you. It's just that's what they believe is right, and they just never bothered to check it out.
Hmm.
Um, I'll give you an example right now. The broker dealer I'm with, they have a discussion board, and there is a discussion right now of someone who is inheriting an IRA. Well, regulations changed recently where if you inherit an IRA, you're supposed to deplete it within 10 years,
Correct.
unless you're an eligible designated
And,
beneficiary.
Yeah, an EDB.
Yeah. And so now there's this huge discussion about, okay, the brother who's inheriting, is he actually an EDB and can now take that distribution over his lifetime, which depending on, and actually everybody that's for the most part's weighing in saying, yeah, he should be able to accept this EDB designation and do it over his lifetime and not have to deplete it in 10 years. So, but if you look at the regulation, it's so vague that and the IRS hasn't come out on a ruling on this yet.
Yeah, we could spend, a whole hour talking about the Secure Act and those regulations and how poorly this is being rolled out.
Yeah.
Because there is no clarity on this. But yeah.
Well, and that's the thing with most regulations, there's usually some unintended consequence.
There's so many unintended consequences with the Secure Act, though.
Well, good intentions. What is it?
Yeah, we're assuming there are good intentions.
Yeah.
But I mean that's a good point, though, that you bring up. You want to make sure how your advisor is being compensated, and make sure that it's fair. And I've worked with advisors who make sure to point it out. This is how I'm being compensated. Just so that because and ask, because I can tell you from in my line of work, I see lots of different statements from different investment houses, and sometimes it's really hard to tell how that compensation is being taken. So if you're not sure, ask the question.
Oh yeah, and you also need to understand the fees that you're paying. It's not unusual for me to talk with someone and they're going, oh, I'm not paying any fees from my 401k. Oh yeah, you are.
They're not being as transparently presented to you as they should be.
Exactly. That's the thing is, if you've got it in any kind of mutual funds, there are fund fees that you're paying. And you also need to understand, is your employer paying the participant fees or are you paying it? Because like you said, it's not very transparent. And I love these statements that they send out with the 401ks that explain the fees, because most people, won't read them because they don't understand them. And if they did bother to read them, they go, well, this still isn't telling me what I'm paying.
That's right. It's to say we disclosed it, but we really didn't.
We disclosed it, but you're going to have to sit down and figure out what that number is.
Right. Well, Mary, this has been wonderful. I really appreciate you coming on the show today. If any of our listeners want to reach out to you, what's the best way to do that?
They can give me a call. They can send me an email. My website is www.demeterfs and like franksam.com. All my contact information, of course, is there. I am on LinkedIn and I'm on Facebook. So.
Well, wonderful. Well, again, Mary, thank you very much for being here today.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.